Welcome to the Atheist Witch Podcast, a bi-weekly podcast for witches or any curious minds to learn more about a non-theistic approach to witchcraft. I'm sharing my journey as I find my way between actively practicing witchcraft and navigating a non-theistic viewpoint. Hello and welcome to the Atheist Witch Podcast, a bi-weekly podcast for curious and science-minded witches. Thank you for joining me for episode 12, Astrology. In today's episode, we'll talk about astrology basics, how it relates to actual astronomy, and how to use this ancient study of the planets for personal growth as an atheist witch. Have you ever heard of planting by the moon? My personal practice snippet today is coming to you straight from my garden. I'm seeing a bumper crop so far this year, and it's been keeping me busy among my plants and my pollinator friends. I got curious about what it is to plant by the moon, so I've been looking into that, and I thought I'd share it today. This isn't strictly a witchy practice, and farmers have sworn by this growing method for centuries, if not longer. The concept is that the water, both in the ground and in our plants, is affected by the gravitational pull of the moon, just like the tides in our oceans. So the theory goes that seeds underground will absorb the most water during the new and full moons. Furthermore, above-ground crops should be planted when the moon is waxing, and root crops do best when it's waning. During the last quarter moon, it's said to avoid any planting and focus instead on weeding, mulching, or doing other garden activities. Since I happily align a lot of my other life patterns with the lunar cycle, I'll be trying this out in my garden. If you've been planting by the moon, I'd love to hear how that's worked out for you, so drop me a line in email or socials. Similar to the episode on divination, many of you may be wondering how such things as planetary alignments and predicting your future based on your birth chart could possibly fit into an atheist worldview. That is precisely what we'll talk about today, and how the magic in astrology isn't about some supernatural influence from distant planets, but rather about the psychological and self-exploratory tools astrology can offer. My greatest challenge with astrology as a practice is that while other tools for self-reflection leave a lot up to our interpretation, like a lot of the divination methods we discussed in episode 10, astrology usually deals in absolutes and definites. For example, a Gemini rising sign is said to demonstrate the dual-faced nature of Gemini as their reflection to the world. If you happen to be a Gemini rising, that's what you're told, so in order to make this into a workable tool for an atheist, we have to be creative. That said, if astrology really resonates with you and you want to use it in your practice, this episode will be a good one for you. Before we dive in too deep on the atheist perspective, let's start with a brief rundown of traditional astrology. At its core, astrology is an ancient practice that claims to divine information about human affairs and terrestrial events by studying the movements and relative positions of celestial objects. It's based on the idea that the positions of the sun, moon, and planets at the moment of your birth can influence your personality, relationships, and even the path of your life. This is your birth chart, a cosmic snapshot of the sky at your exact time and place of entry into this world. Your birth chart is a complex map divided into 12 houses that represent different areas of life, from self-identity to career to relationships. Each of the planets, the sun, and the moon are placed in these houses and in specific zodiac signs, which are 12 constellations along the ecliptic, the apparent path of the sun through the sky. Each planet, sign, and house has symbolic meanings and archetypes associated with it. For example, your sun sign, which is usually what people mean when they ask, "What's your sign?" represents your core essence and ego. Your moon sign speaks to your emotional nature and subconscious, and your rising sign, or ascendant, is how you present yourself to the world. It's a rich tapestry of symbolism that can offer endless avenues for interpretation. So, how does this ancient practice relate to modern astronomy, the scientific study of celestial objects and phenomena? They both deal with the same celestial bodies, but their approaches and interpretations diverge pretty significantly. Astronomy is about observable facts, laws of physics, and empirical data. Astrology, traditionally, is about correlation and symbolism. But that doesn't mean there's no connection whatsoever to scientific principles, especially when we look at the real-world impact of celestial mechanics. Think about it. The moon's gravitational pull directly influences our ocean tides. The Earth's tilt and orbit around the sun are responsible for our seasons, which profoundly affect life on our planet. Even the sun's electromagnetic energy and its varying levels of penetration at different times of day can have an impact on our brains and our bodies. We talked about this a bit in the Science and Witchcraft episode, and it's a concept I keep coming back to. While these are not the mystical influences often ascribed to planets in traditional astrology, they are very real, measurable effects that shape our environment and, by extension, us. From an atheist witch perspective, this is where the lines begin to blur. While I don't believe Mars is literally making me argumentative because it's in a certain house, I can acknowledge that the physical movements of celestial bodies have tangible effects on our world. It's about recognizing the interconnectedness of everything, from the smallest particle to the largest planet, and understanding how these forces manifest in our experience. Let's talk specifically about the moon. Beyond its undeniable gravitational pull, the different phases of the moon have long been associated with various energies and intentions in witchcraft. For the atheist witch, this isn't about the moon sending us energy, but about how our perception of its changing illumination can trigger different psychological states and focus for our intentions. I don't know about you, but I always smile when I spot the moon in the sky, and I find comfort in the steady pattern of the moon phases. Thinking for a moment about the new moon, when the sky is dark and the moon is invisible, this phase is often associated with new beginnings, setting intentions, and planting metaphorical seeds for what you want to manifest. Or, real seeds. For the atheist witch, this can be a powerful time for introspection, journaling about new goals, or starting fresh projects, tapping into the psychological feeling of a clean slate that a new moon can inspire. As the moon grows into the waxing moon and eventually the full moon, it's a time of increasing energy, growth, and bringing things to fruition. This is when you might focus on actively working towards your goals, pushing through challenges, and celebrating progress. The bright, luminous full moon can be a potent symbol for culmination, abundance, and empowering your intentions. Many witches, myself included, find this a perfect time for intense spell work or charging of tools. Then, as the moon begins to shrink, we enter the waning moon phase. This period is traditionally about release, banishing, and letting go of what no longer serves you. For the atheist witch, this translates into shadow work, clearing out old habits, and releasing mental clutter. It's an opportunity for deep self-reflection and purging anything that's hindering your growth. And finally, the dark moon, a time for quiet and introspection, and a deeper dive into the subconscious before the cycle begins anew. This cyclical observation of the moon throughout her phases can be incredibly grounding and empowering, allowing us to align our personal rhythms with the natural world around us. One of the most well-known aspects of astrology, and usually the first one a lot of us learn, is the horoscope. For many, this is the most accessible and often most sensationalized aspect of astrology. We see them in newspapers and online, offering daily predictions based solely on our sun sign. For an atheist witch, the idea of a generic daily forecast for millions of people based on just one sign clearly doesn't hold up to scientific scrutiny. However, we can approach horoscopes with a different lens. Instead of rigid predictions, consider them as prompts for self-reflection and archetypal exploration. When you read your horoscope, ask yourself, does this resonate with my current feelings or experiences? If so, how can I use this as a starting point for introspection? What aspects of myself might this highlight? For example, if your horoscope says, Aries, today is a day for bold action and asserting your will, instead of taking it as a command, consider it an invitation. Is there an area in your life where you could be more assertive? What small step can you take to embody that bold action energy today? It transforms from a passive prediction into an active tool for self-coaching and conscious engagement with archetypal energies. It taps into the same psychological power we discussed around visualization and neuroplasticity. So, if we're not talking about divine influence or predetermined fates, how can an atheist witch actually use astrology in their practice? This is where we can talk more about the power of archetypes, shadow work, and self-affirmation. For me, zodiac signs and planetary placements in a birth chart serve as classic archetypes. They are universal patterns of behavior, personality traits, and energies that resonate with the human experience. When I look at my birth chart, I don't see a fixed destiny, I see a potential map of my own psychological landscape. Let's take the example of a sun sign. If your sun sign is Leo, traditionally associated with creativity, self-confidence, and a desire to express the heart, you can use that archetype for self-reflection. Do you see those qualities in yourself? How do they manifest positively? Where might they lead to challenges? This isn't about being told who you are, but rather about having a framework to explore who you are. My sun sign actually is Leo, so for me, thinking about the Leo archetype encourages me to consider how I express my creativity and willpower and how I can confidently lead my own life. Conversely, if your assigned sun sign doesn't fit or doesn't really inspire you, that's fine too. Explore what's different about yourself and consider what archetype does fit into your life. Also, remember that we change throughout our lives, a lot. What resonated 5 years ago may not be true today, and that's another rich avenue of exploration of self. This leads directly into the realm of shadow work. If a particular planetary placement or aspect in your chart points to a challenging archetype, say a difficult placement of Saturn that suggests a struggle with limitations or authority, an atheist witch can use this as a prompt for introspection. Instead of fearing a bad aspect, you can say, how does this archetype play out in my life? What subconscious beliefs or patterns might be holding me back here? How can I integrate these shadow aspects of my life in a healthy way? It becomes a tool for self-awareness and personal growth rather than a prediction of doom. We touched upon shadow work in previous episodes, particularly in rituals and spellcraft, as a way to shift our subconscious memory and related reactions, and effectively rewire our brains. Astrology can provide an interesting jumping-off point for this type of deep, introspective work. Furthermore, astrology can be incredibly useful for self-affirmation and intention setting. Once you understand the archetypal energies at play in your chart, you can consciously choose to embody the positive aspects of those energies. If your chart highlights a strong Venus influence, symbolizing love, art, and social graces, you can use that as an affirmation for cultivating those qualities in your life. During a new moon, which, as we noted, is traditionally a time for new beginnings and setting of intentions, you might look at the current astrological alignments and see how their archetypal energies can support your goals. It's about leveraging these symbols to focus your own mental and emotional energy, which, as we know from discussions on neuroscience and the power of belief, can be incredibly potent. It's similar to how we use color correspondences to evoke desired emotions or mental states. For example, you might look at the current moon phase and its corresponding zodiac sign. If the moon is in Taurus, an earth sign associated with stability and abundance, you might choose to focus your spell work or meditation on grounding, financial prosperity, or cultivating a sense of security. you can consciously align your personal energy with the prevailing archetypal energies, seeing them as prompts and inspiration rather than external commands. A good dose of suspension of disbelief here can also help you really lean into those associations and make the results all that more effective. Astrology also helps us to track cycles. We are cyclical beings, and the universe is cyclical. The moon waxes and wanes, seasons change, and tracking these larger cycles through astrology can help us understand our own personal ebbs and flows. When we acknowledge these rhythms, we can work with them rather than against them, leading to a more harmonious and effective practice. Remember what I've said about subjective interpretation in divination? Astrology for an atheist witch falls squarely into this category. The beauty of it is that you get to decide what meaning you extract from your chart, and it's not about an external force dictating your life, but about using a rich symbolic language to better understand your own inner world. It's a lens through which to view your strengths, your challenges, and your potential, all while remaining firmly rooted in a scientific and evidence-based understanding of the universe. I hope I've opened your mind to the possibility that astrology, stripped of its supernatural claims, can be a valuable and fascinating tool for self-discovery and conscious creation for the atheist witch. That's all for today's episode of the Atheist Witch podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, subscribe, or leave a review wherever you listen to podcasts. You can also follow me on Instagram at @anatheistwitch or email your comments and questions to anatheistwitch@gmail.com. Your feedback helps shape future episodes. Until next time, keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep making your own magic. Thanks for listening.